Welcome to Deep Dive into Knowledge.
Why is gold so valuable? The strange secrets of gold.
Welcome to this deep dive into knowledge.
It is genuinely a pleasure to be here.
Take a second just to settle in. Wherever you are right now, just pause. I want to start with a very grounding observation, and it involves looking at what you might be wearing right now.
Right.
Notice if you have a piece of jewelry on. Maybe it is a ring on your hand, a necklace resting against your skin, or even a watch. If you aren't wearing any yourself, just picture someone close to you who is.
We all know someone who wears it daily.
Exactly. Now focus your mind entirely on the material itself. That soft, distinct, heavy yellow metal.
Gold.
Yes, gold. It is a substance so embedded in our daily lives, our culture, and even our language that we almost never stop to actually think about the sheer strangeness of it.
It is incredibly strange. And that strangeness is the paradox we are exploring today. This single metal has driven human behavior for over 6,000 years.
Which is just a staggering amount of time.
It really is. We go to immense, almost unimaginable lengths to find it. We dig it out of the ground at enormous financial and environmental cost. We refine it, we shape it into something beautiful, and then for the most part we take it and bury it right back underground in dark, silent, highly guarded vaults.
You dig it up just to bury it again.
Precisely. And the scale of that cycle really hits home when you look at the numbers. Right now, the total value of all the gold in the world exceeds $12 trillion.
12 trillion.
Yes. And to put that figure into perspective, $12 trillion is more than the gross domestic product of every single country on Earth, with the exception of just two.
The United States and China.
Spot on. You literally have the equivalent of a major global superpower's entire economic output wrapped up in a heavy metal that largely just sits in the dark doing absolutely nothing.
So the goal of our conversation today is to gently unpack why that is, why this particular metal, because, you can't eat it. It doesn't keep you warm. As you said, it mostly sits idle.
It is essentially useless for basic survival.
Yet it holds this undeniable gravitational pull over human society. To understand why, we have to look at it through a few different lenses. We are going to explore the chemistry of the element, the ancient history of our ancestors, the quirks of human evolutionary biology, and the sheer mechanics of the cosmos.
It is a fascinating journey. But I think before we even get to the gold itself, we need to answer a very fundamental human question.
What actually makes anything valuable to us in the first place?
Exactly. We throw the words value around constantly, but breaking down what it actually means is crucial. From an economic standpoint, value generally rests on four main pillars.
Let's walk through them.
The first one is rarity. Think about air. Air is absolutely essential to keep you alive, but because it is incredibly abundant, it is economically free.
Yeah.
If something is everywhere, we simply do not put a price on it.
Right. Scarcity creates the foundation for price.
And that leads naturally to the second pillar, which is utility. If something is exceptionally rare but has no use whatsoever, we tend to ignore it entirely. There are plenty of highly obscure, incredibly rare elements on the periodic table that humanity pays zero attention to because they do not do anything for us.
So it has to be rare and it has to be useful.
Yes. Then you have the third pillar, which is beauty or desirability. We are deeply aesthetic creatures. We like things that look good, and perhaps more importantly, we like things that allow us to signal our status to the rest of our social group.
Which is a huge part of human psychology.
It is, which brings us to the final pillar, and this one is really about time. Durability. Obviously, if I want to store my wealth or the product of my labor to pass down to my children, I cannot store it in something that rots.
Like storing your life savings in ambles.
Exactly. Things that decay inherently lose their value. So when you lay out those four pillars, rarity, utility, beauty, and durability, what becomes immediately apparent is that gold uniquely, miraculously almost, satisfies every single one of them.
I want to really dig into that first pillar, rarity. We all intuitively know gold is scarce, but the physical reality of that scarcity is hard to wrap your head around.
It is surprisingly small.
If you were to gather every single scrap of gold ever mined across the entirety of human history, every ancient Egyptian artifact, every Roman coin, every wedding band, every bar sitting in Fort Knox, and you melted it all down into one solid cube.
How big do you think that cube would be?
That is the mad part. That cube would only measure about 21 to 22 meters across. It would easily fit within the lines of a standard tennis court rising just a few stories high.
Wait, a tennis court? All the wealth, all the wars, all the human effort across 6 millennia, and it wouldn't even fill a local gymnasium.
It is completely wild to think about. That tiny block of metal underpins the entire architecture of global finance. But there's a really interesting caveat to this scarcity. The greatest gold reserve on our planet isn't actually buried in the rock beneath our feet.
It is in the sea.
Yes, it is suspended in the ocean.
The idea of oceans filled with gold sounds like a myth, but it is a strict chemical reality. The mathematics are quite straightforward. Every cubic kilometer of seawater contains roughly 13 kilograms of gold.
And there is a lot of seawater.
An unfathomable amount. When you consider the vast, incomprehensible volume of the world's oceans, the total amount of gold suspended in the water is enormous. We are talking about millions of tons of it gently washing against our shores every single day.
So sitting with that thought, the obvious question you have to ask is, if there is so much of it out there, why aren't we just filtering it out of the water?
Because the ocean protects its treasure through simple economics. The concentration of that gold is vanishingly small. We are talking far less than 1 part per trillion.
Just a microscopic dusting spread out over miles of water.
Exactly. To extract it, you would need to pump and filter millions upon millions of liters of seawater. You would have to use massive amounts of energy and highly complex chemical processes. The financial and energetic cost to extract a single ounce of gold from the sea far exceeds the value of the gold itself.
So you would go bankrupt trying to get rich.
You would. It is completely uneconomical.
And there is a beautiful irony there. The very fact that the sea's gold is unreachable is exactly what preserves the immense value of the gold we already possess. If we could easily filter it from the water, the rarity would vanish instantly, and the price would collapse.
It is a perfect, natural equilibrium.
But this brings up a much larger question. We talk about mining it from the earth or the sea, but where does the element actually originate? Because, as we know, it didn't start here.
No, it didn't start on Earth at all. The journey of the gold you might be wearing right now started in a place of unimaginable violence. To find its origin, we have to look out into the cosmos. Normal stars, even our own sun, simply cannot create it.
Right, because nuclear fusion inside a standard star has a hard limit. Immense gravity crushes lighter elements together to form heavier ones. So hydrogen fuses into helium, helium into carbon, and so on up the chain.
But once a star begins to fuse iron, the reaction stops releasing energy and starts consuming it. The star eventually collapses. Gold is incredibly heavy. Its atomic number is 79. It cannot be forged by the steady burning of a normal star.
So how does the universe make it?
It requires conditions that defy our everyday understanding of physics. It requires the collision of neutron stars. When a massive star dies in a supernova explosion, sometimes the core left behind is so dense that protons and electrons are crushed together to form pure neutrons.
A neutron star.
Yes. You end up with a sphere perhaps only 20 kilometers across, but containing the mass of a couple of our suns. To give you a sense of that density, a single teaspoon of neutron star material would weigh millions of tons.
Just picture that for a moment. A tiny, incredibly heavy, dark star hanging in the void of space.
Now imagine 2 of those incredibly dense stellar remnants locked in a binary system, slowly spiraling towards one another over billions of years. As they draw closer, they accelerate, eventually colliding at a significant fraction of the speed of light.
A kilonova.
A kilonova. The sheer catastrophic force of this cosmic explosion forces neutrons into the nuclei of lighter atoms, rapidly building up these incredibly heavy, dense elements. Gold, platinum, uranium, they are forged in this singular violent flash of creation.
And then sprayed outwards into the cold vacuum of space.
Exactly. That stardust drifts through the universe for eons. And eventually, a tiny fraction of that drifting dust joined a swirling cloud of gas that coalesced into our solar system around 4.6 billion years ago.
But there is a massive catch when it comes to the gold actually being on Earth, isn't there?
Yes, there is a crucial geological mechanism at play. When the Earth was first forming, it was entirely molten. It was a violently hot liquid sphere of rock and metal. Now, gold is exceptionally heavy. It is 19.3 times denser than water.
So it sinks.
Exactly. Because of that extreme density during Earth's molten phase, virtually all the original gold that was part of the planet's formation simply sank. Gravity pulled it straight down through the liquid mantle, and it settled entirely in the Earth's core, mingling with the iron.
Which means the gold that was here at the very beginning of our planet is locked away thousands of kilometers beneath our feet, forever out of reach.
Completely inaccessible. Therefore, the gold we actually mine today, the gold humans have fought over for millennia, arrived much later. It was delivered during a period known as the Late Heavy Bombardment.
A rain of asteroids.
Exactly. Long after the Earth's crust had cooled and solidified, our planet was struck by a relentless rain of asteroids and meteorites. These space rocks carried their own trace amounts of heavy metals, including gold. When they struck the solid crust, the gold remained near the surface.
It entirely reframes the material. If you are wearing a gold ring, you are literally wearing the debris of colliding dead stars hand-delivered to the surface of our planet by an asteroid billions of years ago.
It is a physical record of the universe's history resting against your skin.
It is quite moving when you think about it that way. But its cosmic origin is only part of the story. Once it is here on Earth, it exhibits chemical properties that must have seemed entirely supernatural to early humans.
Oh, absolutely. Think about how ancient people, who had absolutely no understanding of modern chemistry or the periodic table, would have viewed a metal that simply refused to decay.
Every other material they interacted with was subject to time. Wood rots away. Iron rusts and flakes into dust. Copper turns green. Silver tarnishes and turns black. Stone weathers in the rain.
But gold is entirely indifferent to time. You could drop a solid gold coin into the salty depths of the ocean, leave it there for 1,000 years, and when someone pulls it up, it would look exactly as it did the day it was dropped.
It is what chemists call a noble metal.
Yes, it is remarkably chemically inert, and that comes down to its atomic structure. The nucleus holds onto its outer electrons with an incredibly tight grip.
Because chemical reactions like rusting or tarnishing are fundamentally just atoms sharing or stealing electrons from one another, right?
That is the core of it. Because gold's nucleus refuses to share its electrons, it simply does not participate in these reactions. Oxygen, water, everyday acids, gold, ignores them all.
It just sits there completely unbothered.
It only yields to a highly specific, highly corrosive mixture of nitric and hydrochloric acids known as aqua regia. To the ancients, who didn't have aqua regia, this incorruptibility wasn't just a physical trait, it felt like magic.
It was the physical embodiment of immortality. And yet, despite being so stubborn against decay, it is incredibly cooperative to human hands. The malleability of gold is almost difficult to comprehend.
It is the most malleable and ductile metal known to us. To give you an idea of the scale, you can take a single ounce of pure gold.
So a piece roughly the size of a sugar cube.
Exactly. And a skilled gold beater can hammer that sugar cube out into a translucent sheet covering 300 square feet.
300 square feet, that is roughly the entire floor space of a small flat, all from a single ounce.
Or if you prefer ductility, you could draw that same single ounce of gold into a wire that would stretch for 80 kilometers. It is incredibly dense yet infinitely yielding. You can shape it without even heating it, simply by working it with basic tools.
For early civilizations, finding a metal that was bright, beautiful, and could be easily fashioned into intricate shapes without complex metallurgy was revolutionary.
It was a gift.
We also have to talk about its most obvious feature, the color. Why is gold the only naturally yellow metal when almost every other metal we pull from the Earth is some shade of gray or silvery white?
This is one of my favorite intersections of physics in the natural world. To understand that yellow glow, we have to look at Einstein's theory of special relativity.
Relativity in a piece of jewelry, it sounds absurd, but it is true.
It does sound mad. But because the nucleus of a gold atom is so heavy, packed with 79 protons, it exerts an immense electromagnetic pull on its electrons. For the innermost electrons to avoid collapsing into the nucleus, they have to move incredibly fast.
Think of those electrons like race cars going around a track.
That's a great way to picture it. Because the nucleus in the center is so heavy and pulling them inward, the cars have to drive at nearly the speed of light just to avoid crashing into the center.
And as Einstein taught us, as objects approach the speed of light, their mass increases.
And just like a race car hugging the tight inside lane of a track, these electron orbits shrink inward because of that relativistic mass increase. The slight shift in the architecture of the atom changes the exact amount of energy required for an outer electron to jump between orbital levels.
So how does that affect the color we see?
Well, in a normal metal, like silver, this energy gap corresponds to ultraviolet light, which is invisible to us. So the metal reflects all visible light and appears silvery to our eyes. But in gold, because of these relativistic effects, the energy gap shrinks.
So it absorbs a different part of the light spectrum.
It begins to absorb light in the blue range of the visible spectrum. When white light hits gold, the gold atom absorbs the blue light. What reflects back to your eye is the rest of the spectrum, which your brain perceives as that distinct, warm, hypnotic yellow.
So the color we admire is a daily, visible demonstration of the laws of quantum mechanics and special relativity.
Sitting right there on your finger.
It is rare, it defies decay, it yields to our touch, and it glows with the physics of the cosmos. It makes complete sense that humanity developed a 6,000-year obsession with it.
An obsession that predates our written history entirely. If we trace our relationship with gold back, we find ourselves looking at the Varna necropolis in modern-day Bulgaria.
Dating back to around 4600 BCE.
Yes. Archaeologists there found the oldest known worked gold artifacts in the world. Even at the dawn of human settlement, before large cities, before complex writing, people were meticulously crafting it into symbols of status to be buried with their dead.
As we move forward to ancient Egypt, around 2600 BCE, gold transforms from a simple marker of wealth into profound theology.
It became deeply spiritual.
For the Egyptians, it wasn't just a shiny rock. They believed it was the literal flesh of the gods. They associated its untarnishing yellow gleam with the eternal life-giving power of the sun. It was the key to eternal life.
The scale of their devotion to it is captured perfectly by the death mask of King Tutankhamun. It is crafted from 22 pounds of solid gold.
Which is incredibly heavy for something worn on the head.
Extremely heavy. If you were to melt that mask down today, which would be a tragic loss to human history, obviously the raw material alone would be worth about $1.3 million. But to the Egyptians who crafted it, the economic value was entirely secondary.
The symbolic weight of that gold, its necessity for the pharaoh to safely navigate the afterlife, was infinite. They believed that because gold was eternal, encasing the pharaoh in gold would confer that same eternity upon his soul.
But as empires rose and fell, the function of gold shifted away from the purely divine. Look at the Roman Empire. Their entire economy, stretching across continents, ran on the physical movement of gold and silver coins.
And Rome offers us a very clear, very sobering, cautionary tale about the psychology of money.
It certainly does. As the empire expanded, the costs of maintaining its vast armies and infrastructure grew exponentially. The emperor's leaders, like Nero and later Diocletian, found they simply did not have enough gold and silver to mint the coins they needed to pay their immense debts.
So they resorted to debasing the currency.
Yes. They would melt down the pure gold and silver coins and mix them with cheaper base metals like copper or lead. They would then issue these new diluted coins as if they held the exact same value as the old pure ones.
It was a way to artificially stretch the money supply.
But the citizens of Rome were not fools. They noticed. A debased coin feels different. It rings differently when dropped on a stone table. The color changes slightly.
As people realized the money was literally worth less, they demanded more of it in exchange for their goods.
Which is the classic definition of inflation. Prices skyrocketed. This triggered a devastating spiral of inflation that severely weakened the economic foundation of the empire, contributing directly to its eventual collapse. It is a lesson humanity has had to relearn many times since.
Even after the fall of Rome, throughout the Middle Ages in Europe, the obsession took on a new form with the alchemists. For centuries, brilliant minds labored over hot crucibles trying to turn common lead into gold.
We often view them today as charlatans driven by pure greed, but that is a very incomplete picture.
Because for many alchemists, transmuting lead into gold was about philosophical perfection.
Exactly. Gold represented the ultimate incorruptible state of matter. Lead was base, heavy, and toxic. Gold was pure, radiant, and eternal. By discovering the method to purify matter to its highest state, they believed they were discovering the method to purify the human soul.
They were looking for immortality. It is a very romantic history. But I think, as we sit here today, we need to shift our focus away from the romance of the past and towards the highly industrialized, harsh reality of how we acquire this metal right now.
The contrast between the myth and the modern industry is incredibly stark. The modern reality of gold mining strips away the mystique entirely. It is an exercise in moving mountains to find mere grains.
When people picture gold mining, they often think of a solitary prospector panning in a river, finding a gleaming nugget, a romantic image.
But that is practically a myth today. The easy gold is gone. Today, the concentration of gold in the rock we mine is measured in parts per million. A good modern gold deposit might hold just 5 to 10 grams of gold per ton of solid rock.
Let's visualize that for a moment. A ton is 2,000 pounds of solid earth. Picture a standard car. Now imagine crushing that entire car down to fine dust, hauling it, and running highly toxic chemicals through it just to extract an amount of metal roughly the size of a single Skittle.
That is the staggering mathematics of the modern gold industry. Now, there are anomalies in history. You hear about the welcome stranger nugget found in Victoria, Australia, weighing over 70 kilograms of almost pure gold.
But finds like that are geological lottery tickets.
They're once in history flukes. Modern mining does not rely on luck. It relies on relentless scale. And the physical scars this scale leaves on the Earth are difficult to comprehend unless you see them from the air.
Take the Super Pit in Western Australia.
It is a perfect example. It is an open-cut mine approximately 3.5 kilometers long, 1.5 kilometers wide, and it drops over 600 meters deep into the Earth. You could fit entire neighborhoods, complete with streets and parks, comfortably inside it.
And yet, for all that volume of Earth removed decades of 24-hour digging and blasting, the total amount of gold it has produced is roughly 850 tons.
Which, bringing it back to our earlier visual of the cube, sounds immense until you do the geometry. 850 tons of gold would compress down into a solid cube measuring just about 6 meters on each side.
A single room's worth of metal, extracted at the cost of a hole in the ground large enough to swallow a town.
And what is perhaps more sobering is that global gold production actually peaked around the year 2001. We are simply running out of the easy gold to find. The veins closest to the surface have been tapped.
So we dig deeper.
We dig deeper, we process much lower grade ore, and we expend exponentially more energy for diminishing returns.
Which naturally guides our conversation into a more somber space. The value we place on this metal has profound, often very dark consequences for our world. The environmental devastation caused by modern mining is alarming.
Beyond the sheer physical destruction of landscapes and the clearing of ancient rainforests, there is a massive chemical toll. To separate that tiny, skittle-sized amount of gold from a ton of crushed rock, the industry relies heavily on cyanide leaching.
Cyanide?
Yes. They spray a cyanide solution over massive heaps of crushed ore to slowly dissolve the gold out of the rock. It is efficient, but it creates vast volumes of highly toxic wastewater.
Returning to the Super Pit, the surrounding area has spawned lakes of toxic tailings. These are bodies of water so heavily laden with heavy metals and chemicals that birds migrating across the arid landscape mistake them for safe resting places.
They land on the water and they perish.
The natural world pays a very high price for our desire, and the human toll is equally distressing. We have all heard of blood diamonds, but blood gold is a very real, tragic reality.
Because gold is dense, easily transportable, and universally valuable, it is the absolute perfect currency for illicit trade. Illegal mining operations frequently finance armed conflicts and systemic violence in parts of Africa and South America.
Beyond the financing of conflict, there is the reality of artisanal miners. Artisanal sounds crafted and pleasant, but in this context, it means desperate people, including children, working in the dangerous, informal mining sector.
It is grueling manual labor. They often use elemental mercury to extract gold flakes from river mud. They mix it with their bare hands, and then they inhale the toxic fumes as they burn off the mercury over an open flame to leave the gold behind.
It causes devastating neurological damage and slowly poisons both the individual and their entire local environment.
When you lay all of this out, the massive energy consumption, the toxic waste, the displacement of communities, the financing of violence, the human suffering, it brings us to a dark absurdity that is genuinely hard to reconcile.
We tear apart the earth, we poison pristine rivers, and we damage human lives to extract this tiny amount of yellow metal, just so we can melt it into uniform rectangular bars, load it onto heavily guarded transports, and lock it away in dark vaults beneath the Bank of England or Fort Knox.
Where it sits, entirely silent, doing absolutely nothing.
We go to the ends of the earth to bring it into the light, only to immediately return it to the dark. It forces us to ask, does it actually serve a practical purpose in the modern world? Is it a working metal?
It is, but only to a very limited extent. Roughly 10% of the gold produced is used for industrial or practical applications. Because it conducts electricity beautifully and, crucially, never corrodes, a microscopic amount lives inside the circuitry of almost every modern electronic device we use.
It also has a vital role in medicine. Its chemical inertness makes it highly biocompatible. The human body does not reject it as a foreign substance.
Exactly. Science is utilizing gold nanoparticles, microscopic spheres of gold engineered to attach to specific targets, like cancer cells. Doctors can then safely heat these particles using lasers to destroy the tumor with incredible precision without damaging the surrounding healthy tissue.
And we use it in space exploration. NASA coats astronaut visors with a microscopically thin layer of gold to reflect the intense infrared radiation of the sun, protecting their eyes.
The mirrors of the James Webb Space Telescope are coated in gold to help capture faint infrared light from the very edge of the observable universe.
So it helps cure disease, it powers our communications, and it allows us to gaze back to the dawn of time. But that highlights a glaring imbalance.
A massive imbalance.
If only 10% is doing all this incredible practical work, where is the other 90% going?
Approximately 50% of all gold produced is turned into jewelry. Another 40% is cast into bars and coins and purchased as investments or hoards by individuals and central banks.
So 90% of our immense destructive effort to extract this metal is entirely decorative or speculative.
To understand that from an economic perspective, we have to look at the psychology of desire and a concept known as a Veblen good. Named after the economist Thorstein Veblen, it describes a very specific, somewhat irrational quirk of human behavior.
With normal goods, the law of demand dictates that as the price goes up, people want less of it. If apples suddenly cost $50 each, you buy fewer apples.
But a Veblen good operates in reverse. It becomes more desirable precisely because it is terribly expensive. Its high price is not a deterrent. It is the core feature.
It serves as the ultimate signal of status.
Yes. If I wear a heavy gold watch, I am not just telling you the time. I am signaling to you that I have such an abundance of resources that I can afford to bind them up in something purely decorative. It is a biological and social signal. I am successful, I am secure, I have surplus.
We see this behavior in the animal kingdom with peacocks and their extravagant tails, a display of costly fitness.
Exactly. And for humans, gold has been the ultimate Veblen good for millennia.
But why gold specifically? Why didn't we choose something else to signal with?
There is a fascinating evolutionary theory that suggests our attraction to it is hardwired into our deepest survival instincts.
The connection between the shine of gold and our ancient neural pathways.
Exactly. The theory posits that humans are instinctively drawn to shiny, glossy surfaces. If you think about an early hominid moving across a dry, parched savanna, a shimmering, shiny surface in the distance usually indicated water. A stream, a lake, a vital oasis.
Water is the most critical resource for survival. Over millions of years, our brains evolved to reward us with a little spike of dopamine whenever we spotted a shiny surface. It kept us alive.
And gold, with its mesmerizing permanent luster, effectively hijacks this ancient neural pathway. When we look at gold, our modern rational brain sees wealth, but our deep evolutionary brain sees the shimmer of life-saving water.
We are physically drawn to its shine and culturally conditioned to revere its status. This combination is what allowed gold to transition from a mere beautiful object into something much more powerful.
It became the very definition of money itself.
For a very long time, it was the bedrock of the global financial system.
From the 1870s right up until 1971, much of the world operated under the gold standard. The paper money you carried in your wallet was essentially a physical receipt. It represented a direct, ironclad claim on a specific amount of physical gold held in a government vault.
You could walk into a bank, hand over your paper note, and demand the equivalent weight in physical gold.
That system forced a certain discipline upon governments. A government couldn't simply print an endless supply of paper money to fund wars or grand projects, because every note had to be backed by physical gold in the vault.
Since the gold supply grew only as fast as it could be pulled out of the ground, the money supply was restricted. This kept inflation low.
But that stability came with a severe lack of flexibility. The rigidity of the gold standard became a trap during times of severe economic crisis, like the Great Depression in the 1930s.
Economies ground to an absolute halt.
To stimulate growth, governments needed to lower interest rates and print more money to get people working again. But they couldn't expand the money supply because they didn't have the gold to back it. It tied their hands completely.
Which eventually led to the monumental shift in 1971, often called the Nixon shock. The United States formally ended the convertibility of the US dollar into gold. The umbilical cord was cut.
This gave rise to the modern era of fiat currency. The paper money we use today has no intrinsic value and is not backed by any physical commodity. It has value simply by fiat, by government decree, and by our collective trust in that government's authority.
And yet, here's the fascinating contradiction. Even though our money is no longer tied to gold, central banks around the world continue to hoard it in staggering quantities.
They absolutely do. The United States currently holds roughly 8,100 tons of gold in its reserves. Germany holds over 3,300 tons.
If it is no longer money, why cling to it so fiercely?
Because central banks understand history. They hold it as the ultimate insurance policy against the collapse of their own systems. Fiat currency relies entirely on trust. If a government falls or an economy faces hyperinflation, paper money can become worthless overnight.
But gold doesn't rely on any government's promise or any political system's stability. It simply exists.
Which brings us to the perspective of the everyday person. We frequently hear about gold as a safe haven investment. Whenever there is global panic, like the 2008 financial crash or the profound uncertainty of the year 2020, we see the price of gold surge. People rush towards it.
In a panic, there's something psychologically comforting about a tangible, immutable asset. You can hold it in your hand, it cannot go bankrupt, it cannot be erased from a hard drive by a cyber attack.
But if we look at it calmly, while gold is an excellent preserver of wealth during sudden shocks, as a long-term vehicle for growing wealth, it is actually quite terrible.
The data is very illuminating on this.
It is. If we look back over a century since the 1920s, after you adjust for inflation, the price of gold has grown at roughly 1% per year. Meanwhile, the broader stock market, which represents human innovation, the creation of new products, corporate profits, has returned an average of about 7% annually above inflation.
A difference between 1% and 7% might not sound massive initially, but over time, compounding makes it astronomical.
Let's do the maths. If you had taken $1,000 in the year 1920 and used it to buy gold, burying it securely in your garden, today, that gold would give you the purchasing power of roughly $90,000, a respectable preservation of wealth.
However, if you had invested that same $1,000 in a broad index of the stock market, allowing dividends to reinvest over that century, your investment would be worth over $10 million today.
90,000 versus 10 million. It proves that gold is not a productive asset. A farm produces food. A factory produces goods. Gold just sits there. It is an insurance policy you buy, fully hoping you never actually need to use it.
Looking forward, we have to wonder if this 6,000-year reign is finally facing a genuine threat. For the first time, gold is facing modern challengers.
The most obvious is in the digital realm, cryptocurrencies.
They are frequently marketed specifically as digital gold, and they do attempt to replicate the economic pillars of gold in a digital space. They are designed to be scarce, with hard mathematical limits on their supply.
They are durable, existing on decentralized networks, and they operate independently of central banks. But they lack physicality. You cannot hold a digital token.
And more importantly, they lack the test of deep time.
Exactly. Cryptocurrencies are a very recent invention. Gold has survived the collapse of the Roman Empire, the Black Death, and world wars. We simply do not know how digital alternatives will perform across centuries of unforeseen existential crises.
There's also a physical threat looming in the future. We spoke about gold arriving on asteroids billions of years ago. What happens if we decide to go back to the source?
Asteroid mining sounds like pure science fiction, but the physics and engineering are being actively developed as we speak. We know there are near-Earth asteroids that contain more heavy metals than humanity has mined in its entire history.
If a single large metallic asteroid were safely brought into Earth's economic sphere, the foundational pillar of gold's value, its extreme earthly rarity, would vanish overnight.
We would have a sudden, massive oversupply. The price would inevitably collapse. Furthermore, the actual utility of gold is being challenged by advanced materials like graphene and carbon nanotubes,
which conduct electricity better, are vastly stronger, and can be manufactured from cheap, abundant carbon. They could eventually replace gold's industrial uses entirely.
So if space mining destroys its rarity and advanced materials destroy its utility, does gold finally become worthless? Logic would suggest yes.
But humanity's relationship with gold isn't purely logical. The psychological conditioning is so deeply embedded in our culture that we might simply override logic entirely. We see this with the diamond market.
We do. Diamonds are not exceptionally rare, and flawless ones can be created in a laboratory for a fraction of the cost. Yet the natural diamond market remains robust, largely through narrative and tradition. Human collective belief is a powerful economic force.
This brings us to a quiet realization that humans are not purely rational creatures. We don't just value things for their utility or their mathematical scarcity. We value things for their poetry, their symbolism, and the cultural weight they carry.
If we summarize the ultimate truth of gold, after stripping away the history, the chemistry, and the economics, We are left with a very simple, very profound fact. Gold is valuable simply because we have all agreed that it is.
It is a consensus, and it is a consensus that has held fast, unbroken, across different empires, separated continents, and millennia of time. It is perhaps the single most successful, enduring agreement humanity has ever forged.
But sit with this thought experiment for a moment. Imagine if tomorrow, the entire human race woke up and collectively decided that gold was just a metal, a pretty yellow metal, but nothing more. What would happen?
The consequences would be instantaneous and catastrophic. Its value would evaporate into thin air. Trillions of dollars of perceived wealth would vanish. Global economies would shake.
And the physical reality of the metal wouldn't change an iota. It would still be heavy, yellow, and inert. But the belief that animates it would be gone. We believe it is valuable because it has always been valuable, and it has always been valuable because we believe it is valuable.
It is a self-reinforcing loop. And it leaves us with a gentle, provocative question to ponder in the silence that will follow our discussion today.
A question about the nature of belief itself.
I want you to ask yourself this. If we as a species are capable of creating such immense world-shaping value out of nothing but our collective belief and shared narrative, what else in our lives, in our societies, and in our world might we be creating or perhaps destroying in the exact same way?
It is worth reflecting on.
The next time you look at a gold ring resting on a finger, remember that you aren't just looking at a shiny piece of metal. You are looking at the remnants of dead stars. You are looking at the weight of ancient human sacrifice and imperial collapse. And most profoundly, you are looking at a 6,000-year-old promise that we made to one another, a promise we continue to keep every single day.
It has been a brilliant deep dive.
Another thoughtful topic awaits us next time, ready to be explored. Until then, we invite you to carry these reflections gently with you into the rest of your day. Thank you for joining this deep dive into knowledge.